Welcome to Soul Soldier Speaks, where we honor the warrior within each of us on life's battlefield. I'm your host, Lindsay Taylor. Here we stand with those on the front lines of their own lives, those battling suicidal thoughts, addiction, grief, and life's hardest challenges. We honor the loved ones standing beside those struggling and remember those we've lost. Each episode, we delve into raw, unfiltered conversations and stories of people who faced the darkest of nights and emerged with healing, transformation, and hope. Together, we will navigate the battlefield, focusing on the battles that save and restore. This podcast is more than stories. It's a rallying cry, an army of soul soldiers reclaiming the light one story at a time. Together, we rise. Melissa, thank you so much for coming on the Soul Soldier Speaks podcast. It's just such a privilege to have you on.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's such an honor. I couldn't wait for us to get together.
I know. So Melissa and I met through our business coach, amazing, fearless leader, Kira Brenton. Melissa wrote a book and I did too. And so Kira helped us write these books. And so that's how we connected. And when I met you, I deeply connected with your story.
Yeah.
We're going to get into your story here in a few, but I want you, so let's actually start with just a brief overview of your book and what happened. That way the audience can have an idea of where you come from, and then we'll get into some of the questions I have for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My book is The Truth Behind the Smiles. And once my husband died by suicide in March 2022, I felt a strong calling to use my voice and use the word suicide. Because I had so many people say, "What do you want us to say?" And I said, "Well, died by suicide." And even in the obituary, I wrote died by suicide. And I even wrote the hotline on there. There was no more hiding, because we had, my husband was so good at hiding behind his smile, his pain, and then a numbing. He was a dentist, and dentistry, I talk about the dark side of dentistry as well, and how, opioids coming in play a lot in dentistry, chronic back pain. And so I just kind of opened that gateway of just telling my whole truth. And that's required me to just feel so much more peace and deeper connections, true connections, and allowing others. And for me to share my whole truth, it allows others to not feel alone ultimately. And ultimately for me, it's just, I don't want anybody else, any other children losing their mom or dad to suicide, because I saw the pain. I saw the pain my kids went through. I went through pain, but to see your children, because we, as parents, you want to protect your children from everything in the world, from all the pain.
Yeah.
But I couldn't control that. I couldn't control that. So now I just want to be able to help families save lives, just like you, we don't want to lose anybody else. And ultimately sharing that book was to allow others to not feel alone. And there is people out there like ourselves that are there to hold that space for you to share how you're feeling.
Gosh, man, thank you for stepping into that calling, because it's not easy, but you're right. People need to know that they're not alone in this. And that's why I started this whole podcast. So first of all, I think, it's very important to me on this podcast to honor the individual aside from their struggles. I think it can be easy when somebody struggles with suicidal ideation or addiction, or we lose somebody to those things. It almost feels like that's how they become known. And I don't want that to be why they're known on this podcast. I want to also acknowledge and honor their struggle and what happened. But I want to first understand the person, like who they were as an individual. So can you tell us briefly a little bit about who Scott was as a person?
And when you told me you wanted to do that, that touched my heart, because I could see my husband was Scott Methven. I could see his heart. But by the end, I couldn't recognize him, but I just want to shine who he was. And so Scott, I met him in my early 20s, and he's this tall, 6'4", green eyes, really handsome, like this Superman. But he was so charismatic and the most giving person. That's truly how I fell in love with this man. He was so different than any other man that I ever met. He was so generous, so caring. He always wanted to help everybody else around, but I also saw in him, even though he was this great big guy, this little boy inside that was hurting this little boy, that this self-love wasn't there, but he could play the guitar. He was excellent guitarist. He was an excellent dentist, like perfectionist. Like I couldn't understand how you can do all the teeny little root canals with his big hands,
Totally.
and he was so smart. He knew every fact about everything. And ultimately even when he died, it was such a shock to everyone around in the community because he hid so well behind his smile, and he always wanted to be that Superman and hold everybody else's pain and help everybody else. But he couldn't, help himself. So he was definitely a giver, very smart, sense of humor, fantastic sense of humor. And so he is deeply missed by all. Everyone thought his best friend, because he was that guy. He could be friends with anybody around, and everyone thought he was his best friend,
Gosh, sometimes we think that there's a certain look, right, to somebody who's struggling with suicidal ideation or addiction, like that you can see it. That's not always the case. Sometimes it's the people that are hurting the most that hide behind those smiles and those vibrant personalities. And so, man, I feel that.
Yeah. Even from me, because I know once my husband died, they looked at like, what else? I mean, I knew he was struggling. There was so much going on in his life at the time. There was a lawsuit for 6 years. He was, a lawsuit against him. And then there was also his dad, who was so close to, he was terminally ill. There was just the chronic back pain from working 5 to 6 days a week, trying to keep a practice going in those pressures. Then he's like, well, I can't take a day off. So you go see the doctor, you have back pain. It's the introduction of opioids. So that was there as well. But then, he had taken antidepressants as well, but there was just a spiraling effect of him losing him in those numbing agents. Alcohol came into play as well. And I was losing him.
Yeah.
But even though I was losing him, he can show up for work. He was showing up for work. He would hide behind that smile, and I would check in on him. He's like, oh, I'm okay. I'm just a little overwhelmed, but I'll be fine. I mean, even just the day before his passing, we were in Maui, the island of Maui, and we went snorkeling with friends, and we had a barbecue. We were holding hands. He was smiling. He was happy. There was so much hope. There was no signs.
I read that in your book.
Yeah. There was no, it was just, so sometimes I kind of wonder, there was such a shift that next day. I can't help wonder sometimes, what that shift was,
This is really, I think, important point you're bringing up of that was such a good day and there was so much hope in that moment, right? But it kind of sounds like from what you talked about, it was a slow progression that led to this where, he ended up starting to struggle with substance use and some of these things. So tell us a little bit about the struggles that kind of led you to that point.
Yes. Yeah. I know, of course, after you lose someone, you kind of replay every year leading up to it. And the introduction of opioids and pain meds were quite early on in his career. I remember the back pain was there because the pressures after being in dental school, $500,000 in debt. It was like he worked 6 days a week, and we built our dental practice in Wasilla, Alaska, and worked 6 days a week. And then that introduction of opioids was really early on. But, he felt controlled by it just once in a while when the pain was there. And the alcohol, he would only, drink on the weekends and not throughout the work week. But it was, I could tell by the weekend hit, it was the heavy drinking to numb from that hard week. There was definitely those signs there. And as more things happened, more stressors, because we all going to have more challenges, then he continued to add more different opioids, different things. At one point, I remember I just had our baby girl, Sophia. She's 2 weeks old. And my husband is getting ready to go for work, and he goes to tie his shoes, and then he can't get back up. He had completely, his back was thrown out. Wow. So he was a month laying in bed and thinking, maybe he can't practice anymore. What is he going to do? Sell the dental practice? He thought he was just going to lose everything and he's going to be crippled for the rest of his life. It was a really scary time. But also in that same time, he was getting 2 doctors to prescribe him. And he was even drinking with it and numbing. And I was like, and I have this new baby and I'm having to drive him to these appointments where they will inject him in the back so he can't feel the pain. So it was just so much. I even had to call a doctor and say, do you know he's getting prescription from somebody else? And I was like, it's just too much. It's causing these big highs and lows. And I could see a big shift mentally. And I was really afraid of where that will go. And I think from then on, that heavier dosing of opioids to numb the pain continued and trickled, but he could still manage work life, social life, but it was definitely continued to be introduced. And I think as more challenges came, the lawsuit, knowing that his dad was terminally ill, once he learned those things, the drinking became an everyday thing.
I was going to say, I think that it starts out as one thing and then very quickly it begins to spiral. And so, it sounds like what started out as maybe him being able to function with it became something that consumed his life. And then really sounds like, I read your book, brought him to a really low and dark place ultimately. And I think so many people out there can relate to that who are struggling themselves or who love somebody who's struggling. And so I want to take a moment just to speak to the person who's listening to this, who loves somebody who's struggling with suicidal ideation or addiction. What was it like to love someone who was battling with addiction? And how did that shape your day-to-day life and connection with your husband?
Oh, I love this question because I just want to have so much compassion for him and show him so much love and help him and want him to see that maybe he needs to kind of like show him that these meds are kind of changing him and maybe this is not the right way. And maybe you need to get away from work for a little bit, take some time to kind of reconnect to and heal. There were some wounds, some early childhood wounds that he needed to kind of work through and he had never processed. And even, with his family members. So I thought he just needed to process all that, go seek help. And I felt so helpless because every time he was like, no, he was never willing to go seek help and go talk to somebody or get away. There's all these, great retreats for addiction and whatnot. I told him I had found one where it's only doctors and there's maybe 6 of them. And, but he was never open to seeing his truth, right? So I felt, okay, I'll look at Better Health. Maybe he can do Zoom calls or sometimes I'd even dump the medicine in the toilet, because I was so angry at it, for taking away for my kid's father, they were taking away my kid's father. And so but then he'd get so mad at me. He's like, I don't understand what chronic pain feels like, but I was just seeing where that was going, and so I felt definitely helpless, but I said, okay, he can't go, not going to go to therapy. So I started going to therapy, said, I'm going to go. I started listening to podcasts about other wives or husbands helping the significant other through opioid addiction or alcohol addiction and listening what they were saying, what tools they were doing. And so a lot of it was trying to start setting boundaries and taking care of me because I could feel that I can almost numbing out myself emotionally because I didn't know what else to do. I felt a little helpless. And so I just hid behind a smile and I kept going in hopes that it's just a phase. Yeah. Because it wasn't always bad. There were some days where he was happy and doing well, going for a workout. Like he loved jujitsu and would do that. And I was like, great. Or he'd go fishing, love fishing. There was these highs and lows. So I really held on to the highs in those dark. So it was really hard, but I started having to take care of my nervous system. I couldn't lay down always right next to him at times because I could feel that darkness that's stewing and it was pulling me in and I had to keep showing up for my kids. I had to be there.
That's so powerful. I think you bring up such an important point to this, that, we ultimately, as much our love for somebody else makes us just want to be able to help them. And we can see what they can't see, right? Because they're in the middle of their struggle, in the middle of their addiction, and they're not seeing what we're seeing from the outside as a loved one, right? But we can't ultimately force treatment on anybody. They have to ultimately want that. And so what I hear you saying is you ended up kind of turning inward to yourself, and what can I control? What can I do to help myself be the best that I can be for my kids and for him? But also part of that is setting boundaries, right? And so, wow, I think that's really important, that we recognize that, yes, we can be there for that person. We can support it. We can want it for them. They ultimately have to want it for themselves. So at the end of the day, what do we do? Yeah. Right? What can we do to help ourselves?
Yeah, I even I wasn't a big drinker, but I stopped drinking. I said, I'm just not drinking, and in hopes that can follow through. As much as I was asking for that, I was like, okay, well, I'm taking these steps. If we're going to go for walks and come join us, but we can't force somebody to take those first steps.
Yeah. Very powerful. So what do you wish more people understood about what it means to support somebody through this dark and difficult journey of addiction?
It means that you can be there and compassionate and loving, but it's loving to have boundaries. Yes. I don't think I set enough boundaries earlier on, and I wish I would have. Because I felt like, he's under control. He makes it seem like it, but I just knew it was wrong. So setting more boundaries, be firm with them, and take care of yourself as well, because that saved me, right? To continue my workout routine and prayers, meditations, that just saved me from falling as well,
Oh, so powerful.
And because I could have easily, when I go back up to Wasilla, Alaska, where we lived, and I look at the scenario and I was like, wow, how come I didn't fall alongside with him? Because you can easily do that as a significant other side by side, because you feel so much with them. You're just, it's so easy that both become depressed, both go down that deep hole, but I started doing the work because ultimately for my kids.
Yes. I just have so much for you, and instead of falling, taking on what can I do to better myself in the situation. It's so huge.
Yeah. Thank you.
So since losing your husband, I think we'll end soon here. Since losing your husband, how have you found purpose and meaning in your life? And what keeps you moving forward since the loss?
Oh gosh. Well, I know for sure moving forward right after that strength, people are like, how did you have the strength to do everything that you did? I know my faith grew tremendously. Like God was right there, and everybody praying for our family. I knew that was that light, that force that kept me going. It was like the big calling to use my voice, that for sure. I mean, ever since I had the cyst on my vocal cord, taking that away, God was telling me use my voice. So talk about our story, because that's my purpose, and helping save others to not feel alone. So I don't want anybody else to lose. I don't want any child to lose another parent to suicide. That is so painful. And I see my kids being so resilient and they're healing, but that's so much pain. And so I want to really, that's my calling, to share, to help save life, just like you. And so writing my book, I see another book in the future as well. And maybe a place where we start early on teaching kids those tools to process our emotions, our tools, and how to express them. Because especially for men, men, they hold it in, that was back then a generation to just not speak show your emotions, talk about them. You don't need a therapy. That's a weakness, but truly shining the light that it's okay. And there's lots of resources out there, a lot of people wanting to help them. And so that's my purpose, just to keep using my voice and speaking and sharing, because I know there'll be somebody out there in the audience that's feeling that way. And I haven't shared it because Scott hit it so well. He hit it so well and was able to function. Even though he was on, drinking every day, opioids, he still was that fantastic dentist. So he hit it so well and can still function. And so I know there's a lot of people out there hiding all that, because that'd be shameful. So I don't want that to be shameful, leave a legacy of what you're showing your strength by seeking help. That could be your legacy, that you're still here to live, and you showed strength to your family, to your kids, and taught them that it was okay, that you are not perfect. And you spoke your truth and seeked help.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's end our listeners with one piece of advice you would offer somebody who's listening to this that has a loved one who's struggling with addiction or suicidal ideation. What would that one piece of advice be? What would you leave them with?
That one piece of advice is that you are trying your best. I know you've done it all, and ultimately it would be their decision to make that first step, and you've done it all, but also now it's time for you to give back that self-love, because you're hurting too. You're grieving. I was grieving before he passed. I was grieving because I know I was losing him. So you're grieving because you've lost the husband or the wife that you knew that you married. And so you're going through grief. So you have to start doing your own healing.
Oh, that's so, so powerful. At the end of the day, all we can do is help ourselves in that situation. And so I love that. I love that. Melissa, how can people find you on social media? Yeah.
So I'm on Instagram. It's at Melissa_gratitude. And as well, my website is melissagratitude.life. I do provide breath work as well, virtually or in person or group. And I'm on Facebook, Melissa-Sue Methven, but I also have my podcast as well, the Melissa Gratitude Show. But I know this won't be the last time that we collaborate.
No, we'd love to have you back for sure. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Thank you for
really
having
appreciate
me.
it. All right. Until next time, guys, take care.